With the recently untimely passing of Val Kilmer, I think it's appropriate to talk about one of his most beloved movies, Heat. The Heat follows Sarah and Shannon, played by Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy, two detectives who team up to take down a drug lord of the streets of Boston and... Hang on. Heat tells the story of Vincent Hanna, played by Al Pacino, a crazed lunatic of a police detective who spends all of his time chasing after Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, the leader of a gang of bank robbers, one of which is Chris, played by the late great Val Kilmer. The gang are pulling off heists all over Los Angeles and always manage to evade capture by the police, much to Vincent's annoyance. But as he grows more and more obsessed with taking Neil down, both men start to discover that they actually have more in common than they initially thought. For example, they were both in The Godfather. Smart. The movie is inspired by the true story of Neil McCauley, an ex-Alcatraz inmate who turned to a life of bank robbing before he was captured by Detective Chuck Adamson in 1964. In fact, many of the crimes seen in the film were directly inspired by those of the real McCauley, most notably the use of bolt cutters and drills to rob a manufacturer of diamond drills. Even the iconic coffee shop scene between Vincent and Neil was based on a similar meeting between Adamson and McCauley, even down to the dialogue being based on their conversations. In addition, the character of Nate, who would go on to be played by John Voight, because apparently John Voight has to be in everything, was based on criminal-turned-author Edward Bunker, who served as a consultant on the production and also starred in Reservoir Dogs. The first draft of the script was written by director Michael Mann in 1979 before it was redrafted into a 180-page treatment during the filming of Thief in 1981. He initially wanted another director to shoot the project, first offering it to Walter Hill, who turned it down before resolving to direct the movie himself. Following the success of his TV shows Miami Vice and Crime Story, Mann pitched his script as a new series for NBC, who allowed him to shoot a 90-minute pilot episode with Scott Plank playing Hannah and Alex McCarthy as Neil. The pilot was shot in just 19 days, but the network were unhappy with Plank in the lead role and would only greenlight the show if Mann agreed to recast him. However, the director refused, leading NBC to cancel the show, and the unreleased pilot instead aired as a television film on August the 27th, 1989, under the title LA Takedown, which sounds like a mission in GTA.
Where's your empathy, brother?
Fast forward to 1994, and Mann was in search of his next directing project after the success of Last of the Mohicans. He had originally tried to get a James Dean biopic off the ground, but when this didn't work out, he set out on trying another go at his Heat script, this time on the big screen. Both Pacino and De Niro were Mann's first choices for the roles of Vincent and Neil, and both instantly accepted due to the love for the script, though Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges were discussed as backups if either of them turned it down. And amazingly, this movie marks the first ever time that these two iconic actors would ever share a scene together. As a result, much of the movie's promotional material revolved around the rivalry between Pacino and De Niro's characters. However, not everyone was immediately keen on the script. Amy Brenneman, who played Neil's love interest Edie, initially dismissed the screenplay for being too violent and lacking any morality. But Mann told her that with that attitude, she would be a perfect fit for the part. Okay, someone should really televise a meeting between her and Quentin Tarantino. It'd be hilarious.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Similarly, Ted Levine also initially turned down the role of Waingro for fear of being typecast, though he was later convinced to play another part, and John Voight also didn't want to participate at first, feeling that his role would be better suited to another actor. For the part of Chris, Neil's pretty boy of a right-hand man Brad Pitt, Johnny Depp, Jean Reno, Keanu Reeves, and even John Bon Jovi were considered. Reeves actually came pretty close and was initially picked, but later dropped out in fear of playing Hamlet on stage. In the end, Val Kilmer was chosen after the producers found a way to squeeze filming into his schedule whilst he was on set for Batman Forever. However, Kilmer's agent actually tried to persuade him not to take on the job, as he wouldn't be paid what his stardom was worth by the budget. Thankfully, Kilmer insisted on taking on the role and asked Mann to compensate his low pay by putting his face on the poster between Pacino and De Niro, which the director happily agreed to.
Congratulations.
Filming began in LA during the summer of '95 and lasted a whopping 107 days, during which the cast conducted their own research for their roles. Pacino spent time with real LAPD detectives, De Niro, Kilmer and Sizemore all interviewed real career criminals at Folsom State Prison to prepare, whilst Ashley Judd, who played Chris's wife, met with several prostitutes turned housewives to gain insight into her character. During production, Mann also made a point to film the whole movie entirely on location, using mostly natural lighting to add to its gritty feel. Additionally, during the bank robbery shootout, rather than dubbing in the gunshots in post-production, Mann had microphones carefully placed around the set so that the audio could be captured live. This added to the impact of the scene as it sounded like no other gunfight shown on screen, and probably added a lot of fear and paranoia to the locals and the police department.
How do you get this information?
Heat was released on December the 15th, 1995, and thanks to the all-star combo of De Niro and Pacino, it proved a massive hit, grossing $187 million worldwide and earning immediate acclaim as one of the best action movies of its era. The film's impact was almost instant. It forever changed how action and heist movies were filmed over the ensuing decades, encouraging filmmakers to go for a raw, more grounded approach to filming action scenes. Christopher Nolan cited it as one of his all-time favourites and a massive influence on his Batman trilogy. Many of the missions and set pieces in the Grand Theft Auto games were directly inspired by scenes from this, and the film remains one of the most iconic and influential movies of the 1990s. In fact, in 2016, it was announced that Michael Mann would be developing a prequel/sequel to the movie in novel form, which was eventually released as Heat 2 in 2022. By April the following year, it was announced that he planned to even adapt the novel to film, with Adam Driver and Austin Butler playing younger versions of Vincent and Chris respectively, though as of the writing of this video, the project still remains in development. You can certainly tell that it influenced a ton of movies just based on the opening heist alone. This has The Dark Knight written all over it. It happens in so many action films now, but this was incredibly creative and groundbreaking for its time. Oh, someone must have had the curry. I think it goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Robert De Niro is pretty much incredible in anything he touches. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't consider him in the top 10 greatest actors of all time. There's some nice atmospheric music as he and Edie bond, and it flows together really well. Even in scenes where he doesn't have any dialogue, you can tell exactly what he's thinking based purely on his facial expressions alone. In fact, all of the performances are top notch across the board. Val Kilmer isn't in as much of the film as the others, but he's still great, and it's a shame to have lost such a great talent so soon. I do think the romance with his wife is a bit cheesy at points. The movie is damn near 3 hours long, and scenes like this I feel could have been trimmed down a bit to tighten the pacing even more. It doesn't even feel like it belongs in the same movie at points. We're watching this super intense action crime saga, but then we cut to Chris and his missus and it looks like something out of an MTV music video. That being said, his character is handled fantastically throughout the film, and he even ends up being the only member of the team to survive to the end of the movie. They even hint at his survival in the opening heist, as he's the only one wearing a black mask, while the others, who will end up dead, are all wearing white. It's great visual storytelling. The movie does a great job building suspense at points. There are several times when the tension building is great right before the action kicks in, but there are other times when it could really pass for a damn thriller, not an action flick. The direction and suspense are really well handled, although at points the editing needed a bit of work. The action is great with a smidge of gore, but it never overdoes it. Sometimes, however, there is a bit of cringe, like here with Jake the Snake Roberts.
I can always tell when people lie to me.
I ain't lying. You a hot dog. A regular rodeo rider.
The musical score is great, as are the performances, so when a character kicks the bucket, you do feel the impact. Throughout, the score constantly gets you pumped for the action. It's a generally exciting film, but again, this is my short attention span. I think it could have been trimmed down slightly. Pacino is also amazing. His girl wants to be more involved in his life, but he doesn't want her to see all of that crime, and man, Pacino really did have a type when it came to choosing movies, didn't he? But he is amazing throughout, even if in this scene he's imitating Samuel L. Jackson.
Charlene Hairless.
Who?
Who? Who? Are you now?
Then there are moments where he's a little too over the top, and it's hard to take him seriously, and he becomes Nicolas Cage.
Why'd I get mixed up with that bitch?
Because she got a great ass! And you got your head all the way up it!
The funny thing is, this wasn't supposed to happen. Yet it wasn't actually in the script this way. Originally, he was just supposed to say the line calmly, but Mann had made him do the line so many times at this point, he flipped his and did this take instead. Hank Azaria's reaction of shock is completely genuine. It's not acknowledged in the film, but in the early drafts of the script, it was said that his character was a cocaine addict. So Pacino claimed that this would explain all of his erratic outbursts. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Oh, that's reassuring.
There's a whole sequence where they intercut between all of these different characters talking to each other, but it works to really get you invested in all of them in a short amount of time. The famous coffee shop scene is absolutely incredible. Everything from the dialogue to the atmosphere to the performances comes together to create what is hands down one of the greatest scenes in movie history. And you could even argue that this inspired the interrogation scene in The Dark Knight as well. The fact that this is the first time in Hollywood history that Pacino and De Niro share the screen together makes the scene that much more iconic. And they genuinely shot this scene completely without any prior rehearsal so that their interactions could be as spontaneous as possible. And it is pretty entertaining to watch these two badass thugs trying to comprehend what a normal life is.
So you never wanted a regular type life. What the
Is that barbecues and ball games?
They have some amazing chemistry together, especially when they attempt to have a badass off.
Anybody feel sick? Anybody got heart trouble? Go ahead and lean against the wall.
Well, at least they're considerate criminals, I suppose. The action is so fast-paced and intense. It's pure carnage and I love it, as well as their infinite amount of bullets. Okay, so Chris does run out of bullets at one point and quickly reloads his gun and then proceeds to blast away. And Val Kilmer's performance was so perfect that this scene was actually used by the US Marines during training as an example of how to do this right. Yeah, Batman's got skills. Apparently he really does use guns. There's a great moment where Pacino shoots a dude holding a kid, and there are so many emotions you could interpret from Pacino's face alone. There seems to be a sense of relief that he's come out on top during the shootout, but also possible concern, like he's worried that he clocks the kid as well. The performance is so good. He rushes to save his bird's life in one scene, and the music is so unsettling it really gets you caught up in the movie. And the movie somehow manages to make a man in a dressing gown wielding a gun still look like a badass. The two hunt each other down at the end, and it is so intense. There's no music, just the sounds of the atmosphere, and it's phenomenal. Heat is fantastic. I do think it's a bit long and could have been trimmed down a bit, but I can't deny the great action, legendary performances, terrific music, and huge impact it left in the world of cinema. The performances are brilliant, the tension is off the charts, and it would only be added to the long list of classics that Val Kilmer left along his great career.